On this episode of the Negotiation Society podcast, we have Steve Grossett, who is a friend of ours from Mars, previous history with the Coca-Cola Company. So he's been in market development, he's been in district sales. He then moved to the bottling part of Coke, where he was district sales manager. He now works for Mars in Canada as the customer capability leader. And unfortunately for him, is also a big Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Welcome to the podcast, Steve. Good to see you.
Hey, Mike. Thanks so much for having me on today.
So tell us how you got to where you are today.
So as you mentioned, I'm in the customer capability leader role. So really, my role right now is I'm heading up the learning and development for roughly 400 associates across our Canadian business. It actually all started coming out of school. So I finished my undergraduate in business and psychology, and I took a postgraduate designation in human resources. But the first role that I took out of school was in a sales position, and I just so happened to spend the next decade in sales. And then I came over to Mars a couple of years ago, and one of the first things I noticed was a massive focus on personal and professional development, which really led me into my current role that I'm in now, and which is, again, leading and developing all of our associates across Canada.
That's very cool. Sounds rewarding as well. And when you have 400 people under you, that can be a tough task. What's the best thing about your role?
I say the best. Really two things come to mind. One is just having to learn and adapt in this role, because there is a constant evolution of the skills that you need to develop as individuals and as a business to remain competitive. And I think the second is just being part of seeing our associates grow. We have different generations that are part of our workforce. We have new fresh graduates coming in out of school, and people who've been in the business for anywhere from 5 to 10 years, and then we have more of an aging population, and all of them have different needs and different ways to either break their way into an industry and make an impact in the business, or if you're towards the end of your career, to refining their skill sets to remain competitive and to remain upskilled in certain areas to continually evolve within our business. So I love how that's always changing, and I just love being part of the overall growth and development of people within our business.
Clearly sounds like it. You talk with a lot of passion about that, and I know you to be a guy who looks after the people that you have under your remit. We talk about at TGP being customer centric, but ultimately your customer is a little different. So how important is it to be internally customer centric in your role?
Yeah, so as I focus on the internal partners that I have at Mars here, so this is critically important before anything gets built within our business, looking at currently and anything for the future. So it all starts with understanding the capabilities and the skill sets of our associates, truly being honest with ourselves. We do this through something we call the needs assessment. So it's a very sort of robust program that we have where associates can go through and rate themselves, and it sort of provides you with an understanding of areas of focus that we need to lean into, and then just understanding again the needs of our business today, and then where we want to be as a future state of our business. So we don't want to look too far ahead and lose sight of what's right in front of us, but we definitely need to know the general direction of where we're heading, where we need to be focusing on and upskilling our associates, and that really helps us.
And that makes perfect sense. So the understanding around the capability and the skill set and the tool that you guys use to assess that. But more importantly, you talked about, listen, there are needs today, but there's also a focus on the future, and somehow you have to balance the needs of your associates with what the business needs are currently in future state. That's somewhat of a tough task. How important is the skill of negotiation in that task or within your career?
So in my current role, negotiating is a big part of my role alongside both internal and external partners. So it's something that I've truly been working on probably since I started my career, and I do not believe that it will stop throughout the rest of my career as I look to invest in this area, as it's just such an important part of not just intense negotiating, but just like the the daily conversations and relationships that you have with people. So and that's what it comes back to me is negotiating can really happen on a spectrum. You can have those contract negotiations, more sort of intense, sort of back and forth, or you can have those simple conversations of that give and take. And I really learned early on in my career that negotiating is not so much about having a winner and a loser and always looking for myself to be the winner coming out of a negotiation or a switch situation, but rather to work towards, mutual benefit or an outcome where both parties walk away thinking, I've understood the other side, and I also feel like I'm getting what I need out of this, and we both feel like winners.
That's a great way to look at it. So not about a winner or a loser. In fact, it's about how you can create mutual value to both parties, which ties into that idea around mutuality, obviously, that Mars is representing.
Simply put, I would say follow your passion. I loved my time in sales. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It got me to where I am today. But once I made that career shift and focus internally on the associates of our business, I found a new gear of loving what I do. And I think most importantly, finding purpose in what I give back to the company that I work for. So for me, it came back to something that I was passionate about and something that I find purpose in what I do to give back to to Mars.
That's a very cool answer. I mean, this idea that you find what you're passionate about and give yourself purpose. I assume that'll get you through the day better than just 10 cups of coffee or so as we try to figure out our way forward through this post-COVID world. Just a bit of a pivot now. So, Steve, I know Mars and you specifically are doing inspirational and significant work around mental health. If you'd be okay with it, can you give us some insight as to what that is company-wise, but also what you're driving?
I really appreciate you bringing this up because this is something that needs to continue to be talked about as one of the things I'll mention is that we're looking to, reduce the stigma around mental health, open up those conversations. And as we say at Mars, no more whispering. And last year, we, as a Canadian business, myself and, our head of HR and a couple of other associates within our business decided to lean into something that we call the Be Well team. And this is a focus on associates' overall well-being. And we have a holistic approach. As a lot of us, when we talk about focusing on our health, go right towards, I'm going to start working out. I'm going to start focusing on my diet. A lot of us focus on the physical side, and that is a very important part of our health, but it's just one piece. And we combined that physical health with our social health. Now, heading out of the COVID world, now that we're able to see each other in person and connect again socially, and obviously the mental health side. So that is our holistic approach that we focus on. Within the first year, I was a very heavy focus on the mental health side, starting at the top with our leaders and educating our leaders on what is the difference between mental health and mental illness and how to be an advocate and help support our associates, putting on training to help our associates better understand mental health as a whole and how they can be an advocate for themselves, to speak up and to do whatever they can within their lives to live a positive and healthy life. So sorry, they just came in here. I'm going to go upstairs.
When we run these podcasts, obviously, there's a whole different work-life balance now. Sometimes we're home, sometimes we're not. And for the listeners on this call, Steve happens to be kind enough to be doing this podcast while his son is home with a bit of a stomach ailment. So don't ever apologize for that, man. That's all about the physical, the social, and the mental health side of it, of being a parent. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I'm back in business here upstairs. So yeah, no, I appreciate again too. This just speaks volumes of where we've come as a society. Where I feel like a couple of years ago, if this would have happened, I would have my face would have been red on the other side, even if you can't see it. But I would have been a lot more embarrassed. And now it's just become a way of life and understanding that this is just how we're all dealing and handling with these challenges. So yeah, and then just to finish off speaking on the mental health side. Again, for us, this is an evolution. It doesn't surprise me, as Mars was always been cutting edge and a leader on the EI, like on the equity, inclusion, and diversity side of our business. So leaning into challenges around mental health and things where there's certainly a stigma, and it's very challenging to talk about. I'm not surprised that we're leaning into this. And then on top of that, I'm just incredibly proud to work for an organization that, has put on, different sessions around, women dealing with menopause. Like we had a session called Menopause Matters. We had, a session recently around men's mental health, talking about how challenging it is for men in particular, around the stigma around mental health, and how we can prioritize our mental health, how we can speak up to one another, and to reach out when we do need help. We've tackled suicide awareness. We've had associates come on and talk about how they've lost loved ones, unfortunately to mental illness and to suicide. And again, too, there will continue to be an evolution to this as we speak up. We support one another. We don't have all the answers in this, but we do have our associates' backs, and knowing that focusing on our overall well-being is a top priority, because if that is not in place, then really nothing else matters. So I think that's really sets us apart from a lot of other organizations, and I look forward to others sort of following suit.
That's a very cool initiative that you guys are driving, especially across the Canadian business with Mars. I mean, you've talked to me in the past about you sell such brilliant products, but you need to look after the people who are selling those brilliant products, which is a good way to look at it. You touched on the physical, social, the mental health. So being an advocate and really focusing on the overall well-being through your Be Well team. And I think you really hit the nail on the head in what you guys are calling no more whispering, because clearly there has been and continues to be a stigma around mental health, that people like you are breaking that barrier. So huge kudos to you for the work that you're doing. You also talked about the things that you could learn as a negotiator. So the daily conversations and relationships you have are all part of negotiation. Couldn't agree more. And it's not about being a winner or a loser, but instead it's about trying to drive overall value to both parties or multiple parties in a deal. And lastly, you said follow your passion. And I think that's great advice, and clearly advice, as I said early on, you're a big Toronto Maple Leafs fan, so I'm sure you're passionate there, and you're trying to drive that passion into your son, which must be challenging, because clearly we know the Washington Capitals are the team to support.
That's awesome, man. I always appreciate the ribbing on that, and I don't. I feel like I don't really have much I can ever say as a Maple Leafs fan, as a long-suffering Maple Leafs fan, because they don't give me a whole lot to cheer or to brag about. So sometimes I actually bring comfort in celebrating other successes, even like the Caps won the Cup a few years back. It was so great to see a guy like Ovi, who actually was and always has been a big fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So hopefully one day we can bring him over here. But yeah, man, I always appreciate the ribbon on that.
Listen, I very much appreciate you taking the time, and especially during a day when you are working from home, dealing with your son with sickness and with illness. So thank you for not just representing Mars, but representing a normal work-life balance now in this post-COVID world. It's been a pleasure, man.
So thanks so much for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
All right, Steve. Thank you.